Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope all of you are staying safe and are in the best of your health. I extend to you a warm welcome to etcfo.com. My name is Nidhi, and in this special series, Future of Compliance, brought to you by Clear from the makers of Clear Tax, we bring to you this exclusive masterclass on how finance leaders can tackle the most persistent challenge in global businesses compliance. Being compliant is a CFO's key responsibility. While compliance may be a significant cost to business, especially with frequent changes in rules and regulations, CFOs want to manage compliance efficiently and reduce costs. To unravel the techniques for simplification of compliance and managing it better, I invite Mr. Asim Chawla, practice leader at ASC Legal Solicitors and Advocates. Mr. Chawla is a member of Bar Council of India and fellow chartered accountant and a certificate holder of comparative tax policy and administration from Harvard Kennedy School and Vienna certificate in double tax treaties from WU Vienna University of Economics and Business Austria. He has extensive experience in advising on a variety of tax matters, including international tax, inbound and outbound investment, structuring and cross border tax issues, corporate and business advisory, exchange control and regulatory, and money laundering laws. He's an accredited trust and estate practitioner and member of the Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners UK. A quick announcement before we move on to our discussion. As the masterclass progresses, I would request our audiences to keep sharing their questions with us in the Q&A section. Towards the end, we will pick up questions for Mr. Chawla to answer. So without any further ado, I would now request Mr. Chawla to start off today's masterclass. Over to you, Mr. Chawla.
Thank you, Nidhi, and the team ETCFO for this very benign introduction. Thank you, Rohit. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to my colleague Sonia for helping me with some slides, which we'll just take through them very quickly now in a little while. And I'm also grateful to my very esteemed member from the fraternity, Mr. Puri, who at a very last minute agreed to help us with a fireside chat, and probably you'll hear it more from the organizers. So in terms of the subject itself, when ETCFO team now did suggest the proposition, and I felt that there was so much to speak and so much to cover, and sometimes the simplest things are the most difficult ones to do, and perhaps the topic also does throw up this particular challenge. But having part of the board room, co-chairing many audit committees meeting, and very recently I was oversighting the board of a large state-owned corporation and being part of other boards and advisors, I really felt that sometimes it is easy to say that CFO is an enviable position, but when it comes to reality, certainly there are moments or there are situations when you really find a lot of challenges which are thrown open. And we'll discuss a few of them today. I mean, the aim is to give you a broad overview of what are those challenges at a conceptual level. I have some practical insights in terms of some recent case studies done by Harvard Business. Pardon my partisan for being that on that count. And also, I think we'll have some insightful discussions as we progress along. So if I may request the organizers to just help in sharing the slides, please. Yeah. So overall, the intention is to simplify compliances, and by no means it is a catch-all situation or a one-size-fit-all. And I don't want to use very many cliches, but as we walk along, we all understand that CFOs were largely instrumental in bailing out financial institutions from the fallout of the global financial crisis. Up until Corona, I always felt as a student of fisc and economics and business that the world will be categorized into two situations, at least the modern contemporary era, pre-Lehman and post-Lehman. Of course, now we have post-Lehman, pre-COVID, and post-Lehman, post-COVID also. And because of COVID, I think there is a little bit of overhang which you will find in my deliberations, which is so natural. And in fact, the amount of opportunities which it has thrown up are immense, you know. I mean, there's a recent study done by Bain and Company, which involved about 300 odd large firms globally. And one of the key learnings coming out was the fact that 60% of companies' future roles can be filled in by current employees, assuming that there are adequate programs in place. And second, which was a very stark one, which I felt that came as unusual for me, was that one should not cut back on management development expenses. And why I'm making these opening statements is the fact that CFO has a greater obligation and a responsibility, if not privilege, to look at the budgets of the organizations. And this research gives a very startling takeaway that don't cut back on management development expenses, or don't really tighten your belt on account of shrinkages. In fact, the prognosis is that in short to medium term, the ones who do not cut back are better placed. And there's one more interesting observation which gets thrown out of this, which probably I'll take it towards the latter part of it, which is with regard to the fact that by 2030, millennials will make up about 75% of global workforce. So what kind of challenges it just throws up. So with this little background, let's look at a few slides, which Sonia has been very helpful in preparing. Yeah, Rohit, can we just move on? Next slide, please. Yes. So pretty much in terms of background, what are the persistent challenges which will always be sticky ones and would be pervasive and would be everlasting, so to speak? What could be the fundamental approaches in terms of overcome these challenges, or if not mitigate these challenges, how to cope up with these challenges? Sorry for my being somewhat technical. There are two terminologies which you will hear during the course of our deliberation. One is ICFR, which is right up in front of you, which is Internal Control over Financial Reporting Framework. And the other is a more recent one, which is non-compliance with laws and regulations, NOCLAR. So NOCLAR and ICFR. ICFR has been here for a while, so some of you are quite familiar with the term, but NOCLAR is a term which you will hear at least for a foreseeable period of time in terms of what has happened to the NOCLAR status in terms of auditors reporting, etc. Next slide. Yeah, next slide, please. So the responsibilities have broadened, and the distinction in terms of the accountability of CFO in terms of vicarious and white collar, they are being held for wide ranging of activities, including both financial and non-financial. And in fact, in the Indian context, I can certainly tell you with some authority at my command that insofar as white collar crimes and the whole doctrine of who is person in charge, designations make no difference at all. And the regulatory authorities' pursuit in terms of having a very wide canvas or a very wide framework to capture all is something which is not only worth taking note of, but to my mind is important enough not for it to really get unnoticed or not noticed. Of course, SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley was one important takeaway during the post-Lehman crisis, and the intention with this US doctrine was to hold CFOs personally accountable for the accuracy and responsible for collaborating with other executives in implementing strategies to minimize organization risks and align organizations with various non-financial and financial requirements. So therefore, to just suggest the fact that I was only responsible for a certain set of activities and here is my job description or these are my terms of appointment or terms of reference, do suggest. I really don't think that's something with which one could conclusively persuade either a regulator or a law enforcement agency, or for that matter, at some occasions, even the board also, unless and until you have very many faces at the board level for independent directors to get convinced on certain matters. At the end of the day, all the eyeballs do scroll the CFO and pretty much gaze in a very intense manner, so to speak. Yeah, let's look at the next slide, please. Now, this is a great, I would say, if not a full circle of life, but certainly a full circle where a CFO's day job should pretty much be consumed, and that is how the circle keeps on moving as well as reinventing. So you have situations where you need to constantly improvise and add efficiencies while you are implementing and ensuring compliances are in place. Now, one extreme adage which you will find within the organization, and it's not very unusual, that compliances A are a cost center, B a baggage, C an unavoidable business hazard, and on top of it, it's boring. Now, well, that's a great way of looking at it. I mean, there's no wrong or right about it. Is it really a cost center? I guess the answer lies when the exposures do loom large, and to mitigate that, you need to engage attorneys, consultants, chartered accountants, lawyers, and to achieve that first aid or to get rid of something or to ensure that a given situation does not overhang or looms large. At that point in time, nobody has the philosophical bent of mind to look at that a stitch in time would have saved nine. Now, is compliance the difference between a penalty and reward? The advancement in value chain in terms of outsourcing of non-core activities, use of shared services and automation may have made finance function more complex and more challenging in terms of managing various resources, managing various teams, in-house team, external teams, specialists, outsourced teams, etc. And therefore, is the CFO's life only looking at a compliance calendar or an Outlook calendar, looking at today what firefighting has to be done, and therefore, as I said, like a full circle or a wheel of life, you have this slide showing a particular wheel which turns around and moves forward. I guess if one continuously were to improvise and improve and take a real-time measure of not only what went wrong in the past and what were the learning, which is very natural, but apart from that, an effective CFO, in my view, has to get involved in the entire financial machinery, including establishment, evaluation, and monitoring of adequate financial control, which not only help in effective reporting and but also support and strengthen the compliance function altogether. I mean, my viewpoint on this is quite conservative, on the sense that it is better to err on the side of law rather than to take very aggressive positions, regardless of the fact that I'm a trained litigator. But in terms of taking situations and taking positions, one should be conservative enough to see how much is the bandwidth and the elbow room which is available, and at the end of the day, how much propensity one has to really confront the authorities. And by no means it's a decision which can be taken in vacuum. I mean, these decisions are taken in practical daylight reality, and therefore sometimes the rhetoric and the theory may have to take a back seat. So All in all, to say that compliances are boring, maybe one then needs to find a very adventurous job, so to say. But for a CFO to completely let go of it, unless you have a very strong deputization function, which is reporting into CFO and is only responsible for compliances, then to that extent, how that delegation is being managed and overseen is something which one needs to ponder. But otherwise, I think it's a necessary part of the baggage. I would rather treat it as a very profound privilege with the CFO to navigate the affairs of an organization, so to speak. Let's look at some challenges and opportunities in the coming slides, please. Yeah. So as I said, there is a COVID overhang in our verbiage and in our lexicon as we speak. I mean, no vocabulary is complete unless and until you speak about COVID. So to me, COVID throws automation, digital transformation, work from home, or its various avatars and variants. How do you leverage data and the analytics have been one. And the third, of course, has been the cost management issue around COVID. So, and how they dovetail in terms of the subject which we are discussing in terms of compliances and the challenges. I thought, and we probably would appreciate if you look at the next slide, please. Yeah. So you're walking a very fine line between the ever increasing regulatory scrutiny and transparency and the pressure of performance and the ethical consideration. And for listed companies, I thought this is far more critical than ever before in terms of very heightened scrutiny. And currently we are going through a phase where there's a lot of overdrive with the regulatory authorities. As I said in the initial bit remarks of my presentation, I mean, you have multiple agencies. I think the intention is to get perhaps some brownie points, so to speak, in terms of who is going to act first. But that's on a lighter note. The authorities' ability to take cognizance of matters is getting completely in a situation where nothing is getting unnoticed, so to speak. And if somebody in this electronic world or in this digital age of imprint believes that this particular transaction or this particular arrangement is going to get unnoticed, I'm sure he's living in a Wayne's world. I mean, there is no secret in this electronic world. And to say that something will only remain in four corners of a room unless and until there is no digital or other imprint of it, I mean, you can have your imagination running wild. And one part of it which is precipitated, which we will come to a little maybe in a short while, is the threat which comes from the insiders, which is a clear and live threat, and it takes color in so many forms. So that's one part of it. The other is digital transformation. I mean, coping with the challenges in areas of digitization, automation, and agility is one great challenge which the CFO has at this point in time, as to how to employ technology in ensuring that the organization still remains very nimble, so to speak. Technology is fundamentally changing the nature of the work, and the approach which the companies must take is not only to leave it to the HR. As companies rebuild their workforce after COVID, they must move into some sort of a digital age, and therefore management plans presented need to be more holistic, more rigorous, more data driven, and organizations which will build on those which continue to remain static on those traditional models will be outpaced by very nimble competitors. So given the amount of talent pool you have, how do you leverage technology? I think is an important consideration for a CFO, which will help the CFO in ensuring how technology improves that wheel which we saw a little while ago in terms of the compliance functions. Yeah, next slide, please. This is what is clear and live or clear and present situation if one needs to put that famous adage in place. The incidents of frauds are on a rise. The contribution could be ranging from diminishing or ineffective controls to ever deteriorating ethical values, inadequate due diligences, third party unrealistic goals related to monetary compensation. And I have personally seen it in many undesirable situations. I mean, be it professing at an academic level in terms of taking forensic related lectures for CFOs and for chartered accountants at Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, or looking at the practical implementation on overseeing some client engagement. I mean, very recently, about a year ago, we saw in a change in management where we were instructed by the new set of management team to look at a particular process. And I'll tell you, not only there were skeletons coming out of the cupboard, I mean, it led, the levels reached to a level where you were finding it more than pathetical, to look at situations. And I can tell you, and there's no gainsaying, within 1 week of our presenting our report formally, which would have made a lot of difference, uh, taking its cognizance by the board of being a listed company. While our report was under preparation, we were told that almost the entire top team of a given department decided to offer resignation coincidentally within that span of 1 week. So these are these are situations where either you find teams getting very complacent, or the fact that people have been around, so there is no reason for them to do something which they should not be doing. I mean, at my Harvard days, I was taught professional skepticism, and I believe in that more than ever before. More than half of 1/3 of businesses are affected by insider threat, it's very easy to assume that I will be in that 2/3. When you look at that, over in the last 2 years, the insider threats have increased by 47 odd percent, or as I said a little while ago, more than 70% of attacks are not reported externally, for various considerations. You don't want that the dirty linen is washed in public, either the obligation which you will find even in the new Companies Act, where the auditor has to be a whistleblower. And as I said in the beginning of my presentation, that NOCLAR is something which you will constantly hear, which is non-compliance with laws and regulations. And more than half of the organization identify privileged ones as their greatest insider threat risk. So if you were to assume that I'm in that half, I'm in that 2/3, I think that's too benign a presumption to speak on. As we move on to the next slide, the other acronym which I wanted to emphasize more, because I'm quite hopeful and more than confident that ICFR is something which all of you in your various capacities are have some sort of interaction or assimilation or familiarity or affinity with this concept. So how do you document an updated internal control over financial reporting in terms of your framework during the changing environment? So at a very micro level, you are looking at monitoring compliances which swell into putting or designing systems in place, and then how do you ensure governance standards are in place to control those designs. And at the end of the day, you have the entity level or the group level control which you need to figure out. So from the very basic to the entity level control or something, how you see the function and the framework performing itself and getting tested to various imponderables, so to speak. Now, we all love to talk about it, that ethics is something which is on everybody's mind, and nobody wants to be embroiled or be seen uh, in a situation which is clandestine, so to put, and which challenges the company's well-being, and ethics can and have destroyed enterprise value. And these days, the tapering off or the meltdown effect is so huge and so much that it takes several months and years for one to come together. I mean, yesterday I was talking to a leading IT name, and we realized the fact that how do you conduct yourself has a great impact on your fellow well-beings, and therefore this is something which you need to watch your shoulders all the time. I think CFO is one designation, and I can speak that by virtue of not being a chartered accountant and not being somebody who loves and has greatest of respect for the finance function, but because of the fact that the finance guys bring the sanity onto the board and maintain that fine distinction between adhering to the law and at the same time being visionary enough in terms of understanding the potentials in terms of either corporate business development or looking at growing of an organization both organically and inorganically. So, I mean, if CFO has to perform a role of a mother, I think that's best suited to a CFO. And at the same time, if it has the great vision of a father, who has to broad base the organization, that also is something which one will always look up to the CFO. Now, coming to Noklar, the highlight of the day, so to speak, in July 2017, the Ethics Standard Board of Association adopted non-compliance with laws and regulations as the new standard of disclosures. And this is something which is coming of age in the Indian context also. I mean, auditors will be obligated under various situations to make a reporting. And they are currently also doing reporting, even if you look at the new format of companies auditors report order, CARO, which is popularly known as, they need to report. Whistleblowing provisions are mandatory in the new Companies Act. But if a formalized template comes into being, which is much in the offing and expected, then one needs to be very sure of what is being presented, and the dotted line reporting being signed by CFO will always make him responsible, which takes me back to the acronym of person in charge. I mean, law does not recognize designation, directorships, or who you are. Law only looks at one thing: are you person in charge? And if the answer is yes, whether you are a manager or you are vice president or you are CFO is completely immaterial. I mean, it's so clear and so settled on that. I mean, so at the end of the day, how do you deal with suspected cases of non-compliances? Who is going to talk to whom? Who is going to manage in the most positive and constructive sense here? I mean, not in the most pragmatic sense. How will you ensure those compliances are done, and how would you ensure that they are not repeated? So how do you overcome that? Let's spend some time on that. How are the businesses being looked upon from a financial reporting perspective? What will be the contribution to the overall performance of the organization? Have there been recent changes in the finance functions? Have they been documented? Are the process manuals being updated? Is the risk and control aspect being clearly flagged? And then, are there well-defined procedures that have been established to document those activities within the procedure manuals? I'm not very sure in the nascent organizations when the emphasis is so much on deliverables. Is this something which is equally considered, considering that now the lifespan of unicorns in terms of from unicorn to being a regulated public listed company, and in the last few years, what we have seen, the mutation period is so small that one needs to keep pace with it without realizing the fact that, well, we may be up speed from a business point of view, but we haven't gained maturity on this side. So there is a great deal, not only a great deal of fine balancing act, but you constantly need to look back and prop up your functions and your departments. And at the end of the day, what kind of risks which we are looking at, and is there a risk mitigation strategy in place, and especially those risks which affect the finance department uh, to begin with, which are right in the face of the finance department and not really step removed. So these are a few questions, and how one can answer them. I think let's look at the next slide if we have some answers. So have we established those controls? How effectively those controls are in function at a ground level, not whether they only exist in those manuals. Have our control gone through some independent assessments during to assess their operational effectiveness, so to speak? Have the results improved over a period of time when the last evaluation was done? Are there more opportunities to improve them? Can we automate them can we automate them to make them more effective rather than to add complexity, because you get an IT function also involved into it? Do we have some early warning mechanism that can support detective controls? In fact, this reminds me of a great anecdote. In the good old days, the therapists or the doctors, as they were called, and I'm talking perhaps very many years ago, before the advent of allopathy, so to speak. A good doctor was one who could prevent a disease and not who could cure a disease. I mean, that's what even our scriptures do suggest. So therefore, could we have early warning mechanism which prevent these and detect these rather than having transgressed and a breach having taken place or a non-compliance having taken place? Then, more importantly, the rotation and the changes within the human resource manning the finance function. If yes, how we have documented in terms of updation of the activity chart and the control sheet with regard to making or updating the functions with the rotations happening within the HR team manning the finance function, so to speak. So these are few illustrations which could be of some help as we walk along. Now, I guess there are four fundamental pillars to a role of CFO, as you will visualize it in the next slide, so to speak. Of course, leadership is one. A good CFO is really a business partner of many heads of the other departments, so to speak. He has to work in a cross-functional situation. He's a great influencer in a positive or a constructive way. He has to be a great communicator. There are no doubts about it. In terms of operations, I think that's his strong point. I mean, whether it's constantly crunching the numbers or looking at forecasts or feasibility or outlook, then championing the control function is certainly what we've seen in some of our discussions a little while ago. And then how do you mitigate those risks, having quantified and identified them? And lastly, one of the real value adds which the CFO brings is the strategy, whether it supports us organizational strategy, it evaluates those strategies, helps in communicating those strategies. And there is no gain saying, one of the surveys which I was just looking, considering that leadership is such a strong component of a CFO's real job, so to speak. I was just reading a survey where 24% of CFOs have said, as respondent to this 2021 survey of a big consulting group known as Leithwaite, suggests that 24% of CFOs believe that they are rightly uh, evaluating the job of COO as a natural career progression. 15% of them responded as being a CFO, and less than 15% responded that they want to be seen as business head. So the great vision and the enterprise which a CFO brings and therefore looks at COO as a position in terms of moving forward. So these are, and what are the top 3 opportunities for improvement? Again, the same Leithwaite 2021 Global CFO Survey says that one is technology, which we've spoken about. Second is data management. And third is process optimization. And if you were to look back several years ago, data management was the number 1, which is now replaced by technology. Process optimization was nowhere in the scenario because it was efficiency, technology, and data management, which were the key imperatives, which have been now replaced by technology, data management, and process optimization, so to speak. And I think that will continue in times to come, where technology will play such an important role post-COVID and rewriting the rules of business, so to speak. Another interesting softer aspect which I wanted to bring to the consideration of the attendees here in terms of going back to the Bain article, which finds mention or I think it's published in the September edition of HBR 2021 Harvard Business Review, and where I was a little while ago suggesting about the millennials comprising about 75% of workforce. And this is what the US Bureau of Labor Statistics also affirmed. So what happens when you have 75% of millennials comprising the workforce? And look at a $3.5 billion company in US, ServiceNow, taking a clue from it. They've realized that what is that millennials are looking forward to. They're not looking forward to free lunches, or they are not looking forward to fancy offices. What they are looking forward to are workplaces that helps them in inclusive growth. So there is a culture of inclusion, a workplace that makes things getting done fast and easy, and importantly, the cultures or the organizations or the environment, so to speak, which rewards the people for those who stay hungry and humble. Hungry and humble. So these are very profound statements, which pretty much some companies have tried to espouse or follow in that particular direction, knowing that what is the fodder of the young millennials, what are their outlooks and imperatives, because you as a CFO, you need to figure out what tomorrow's stars are going to look or they expect from you. So if tomorrow's stars, the millennials, they expect an inclusive cultural environment where people are able to get things done quickly. I think that's what you need to consider and aim for, so to speak. So pretty much, what are the key takeaways from this introduction or a quick presentation for you in terms of simplifying compliances? I think there are three takeaways which we'll see. Let's flip to next slide, please. Yeah. So First and foremost is balancing the role between the conscious keeper and a business partner. The two roles have always perceived to have a very conflicting objective, as if these are two sides of a coin, or two ends of a pole, and or maybe two banks of a river which will never meet, so to speak. But I believe a mature organization understands that for a sustainable and successful, for a sustainable and a successful business operation, you need to manage both of it. It's not somebody says you have to manage work and life, but there's another profound school that why do you need to manage work and life? They all go in hand, so they are not two conflicting poles, which you need to manage. Similarly, controller and business partner, I think they're part and parcel of the same mainframe. They are not two opposite ends which needs to be managed or needs to be balanced, so to speak. I think the success of CFO lies in what they're able to create and what kind of value system they bring onto the table by thoroughly engaging with the leadership and stakeholders at all levels of organization. Now, to achieve all this, you can't be in a situation where you are championing the cause as one man army. I think the active support and not a tacit support of the board and CFO, CEO, and the leadership are of paramount importance, completely non-negotiable on this. As the compliance culture spreads deeper and wider, the chances of conflict between the business side and the compliance side becomes lesser. Uh, at the end of the day, there would be a situation where one may need to do a very fine balancing act, but then again, are these two ends of one pole? Uh, you need to balance, or with the help of your adequate professional judgment, skepticism, and learnings. I won't use the word experience because experience comes with age, and you need, and age has no ipso facto guarantee of bringing maturity onto the table sometimes. So it's more about adequate learnings and judgments which helps you in making right choices. I mean, at the end of the day, CFO has to lead by example. I mean, in the most simple sense. I mean, whether you call it that it's the CEO who leads from the front, but sometimes CFOs are the real unsung heroes of organizations, and in present times, they are certainly getting their fair share of moonshine. I think I've taken about good 45 odd minutes out of our initial segment of today's program. So I'll probably hand it over back to the organizers to take the proceedings forward.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chawla, for giving us an insightful session on compliance. Now, I would like to introduce Mr. Vidur Puri, who is a senior partner at SC Wheel and Co. He's a fellow chartered accountant with almost 3 decades in practice. Mr. Puri has been involved in statutory audits of corporate clients across various industries, including automotive, engineering, hospitality, healthcare, banks, and not for profit organizations. He has been assisting and representing in clients' income tax litigation at appellate forums, including the Dispute Resolution Panel and Income Tax Appellate Tribunal. He has varied experience in inbound cross border taxation of expatriates and corporates involving double tax avoidance agreements, foreign exchange regulatory issues for project offices, joint venture companies, and subsidiaries of overseas companies in India. Over to you, Mr. Chawla and Mr. Puri.
Vidur, thank you for being here. I know your name and the firm needs no introduction, but I think it's a great privilege for us to have you here. Since yourselves in your individual capacity as a profound professional and within the firm, you pretty much mentor a lot of big businesses by your insights and in terms of a lot of shepherding which you do. I mean, based on your experience, how do you end up managing compliances? What's the effective mantra you would give to the CFO community at large?
Okay, so if you've gone through what Nidhi, the way it was introduced, and thank you, Asim, and thank you for the organizers to really call me and speak with everybody here. They're all experts sitting here. So if I would put in a golden rule for any CFO or any leader in terms of what it is, because as what you rightly mentioned, and the roles have changed over the period of time. But the mantra that I would put down in a very brief manner is, today the compliances is not just a regulatory compliances. I would say there are ethical compliances. If you look at a US company, there is the US FCPA laws in terms of foreign corruption practices. Pharma, there are their own ethical practices. So if you look at ourselves, what would be the mantra? I would say, looking at the number of laws, you must have a very robust enterprise risk management. So ERM is a must. Then there is a compliance risk assessment which should carry on a regular basis. Do we have a checkbox approach? I think the answer, what I've seen it and would not say that is, let's not have as you rightly said, you may have controls. Have they been tested effectively or not? Let's not have a checkbox approach. It must be what I feel, that the system must speak and must be tested on a regular basis. So at the mantra end of the day, what I would summarize as the golden rule for the CFO would be to have a robust framework, which is well documented, procedures for control, use of technology, and the most important part, what we've learned, even in COVID, as you rightly said, is to have a direct contact with our team. Educate your team, train your team, sensitize them with all the compliances. If you do not have a flow of compliances done from the lowest level of your team, we will falter somewhere. So if there, this is, I think, that I would sort of summarize in terms of what is required as a mantra.
Vidur, any examples from your profound learnings? If not.
Okay. Yeah, see, so sitting on the other side of the fence, in the sense that if what we look at when we are not on the other seat, I would just pick up an example or two where we saw that how a non-compliance could trigger up a major issue. Very small. I think we'll take a very small issue, which I think will resonate with any of the CFOs in our forum today, or any of the persons who are in a finance team. I was looking at one of the pharma entities. Now, simple MSME vendor has to be paid within 45 days. Now, if within 45 days is not paid, there is a liability of interest, and there are dues and requirements to be done. Now, what happens? Now, a pharma company has a vendor who supplies a particular, say, a good to that pharma industry. Now, it sits in the quality department for 40 days because he's raised the invoices, the goods have reached the company, but the quality department is sitting and analyzing the quality. On the 40th day, the invoice is processed and a clear signal is given and sent to the finance team. Look at our poor finance team and the CFO. He's got only 5 days and his entire team has got only 5 days to clear it. Otherwise, there's a non-compliance or there's a penal requirement or an interest. What is the requirement to be done? I think the simple thing is that, did we sensitize in our system that if there is a MSME vendor, has it flagged in my system, in my ERP, in my SAP, that this should be seen in a manner that must be clear in 45 days? Does the person sitting in the quality control know that he has a deadline? If you have a framework, if you have the framework entirely done, that these are the controls, this is a standing operating procedure. If you have a item coming from an MSME, it must be quality checked within a period of time. Do not delay it because it delays the entire process. I think that's a clear example of how a finance team is burdened of a non-compliance of the entire team. So I will come back to the mantra number 3, which I mentioned. Sensitize your team, educate your team, make sure that the compliances are taken note of. I think this is one example. Second example of a regulatory, I would also very recently has been happening in a lot of companies. Again, a lot of CFOs would understand, is something which is a non-compliance for, say, income tax. Now, the simple non-compliance is that we had an example of a company which is had a subsidiary in India. Now, for some reason, they had a cash crunch. They were paying salaries, they were paying the vendors, but for some reason, the top management, the CFO, deducted taxes, but did not deposit the taxes. It could be any reason. It could be an oversight reason. It could be the reason that he may not have funds, but the sensitivity of not depositing the tax. Now, as of today, after 4 years, when the company wants to wind up and do that, there are notices which have been issued for prosecution, because deduction of tax and not deposit of tax is a prosecution. So what I'm trying to say is compliances must be looked at, sensitized to the team. If you don't look at it, it'll come and haunt you later. So I think these are the two examples I just thought of just sharing. And then in the bigger picture, we talk about the framework or whatever it is.
Vidur, since you pretty much look at the finance function very closely as part of the larger practice, are companies really stressed in terms of pressure on their finance teams insofar as aspects of governance, risk and compliances, so to speak?
Yes. So Aseem, as you sort of rightly mentioned about the role of a team leader or a CFO in terms of what he's expected to do, I think you beautifully mentioned about how the role of a team leader in finance has changed from a finance gatekeeper or a guardian of finances to a person who's going to be steward or leading the practices. Now, yes, there is a pressure, goes without saying, because I was interestingly reading the number of laws that we have. I think there are 20, you're a lawyer too. If I recollect, there are around 26 corporate laws, but I think more than 1,200 laws in India, which could be state law, which could be practices, pharmaceutical ethical practices, etc., etc. So 1,200 laws for a person to comply with is a huge task. You may not be 1,200, but so yes, there is a pressure, but how do you mitigate that pressure is the question. I think that's what our forum should be discussing. As of what we're trying to find an answer is, there is a pressure, but the pressure will increase even if you slip once in any of the compliances. They'll turn into a different pressure altogether.
And when you talk of governance, risk and compliance, the GRC framework is something, how do you look at that? Or what would be your counsel or advice to a CFO in terms of having a GRC framework or something?
Yeah, so these are typically the words that we keep hearing or must be underlined in terms of any a CFO who's today would be wanting to lead a practice of managing finances and also playing a dual role of a partially CEO, as you rightly said, of the trinity of the CEO, CFO, CEO. If you do not have a robust GRC framework to manage, then there is no way forward, which would mean that if you have a governance, risk, compliance, and your enterprise risk management in place, you will be walking really in a blind alley if you don't have that framework. You will be just looking at something, not knowing where you're heading for. What a GRC would do is, imagine if we don't have a trigger or an information of the due dates or for all compliances, what will happen is that it'll be all driven by a person, not by the system. So if you don't have the SOPs in place, if you don't have controls in place, today, even a plain vanilla compliances, suppose COVID, is not just pure compliances in terms of regulatory. Today, there is a cybersecurity threat. There is an IT control. The way we've done in the last 15 months is compliances also on the IT side, also on the cybersecurity side. So all these GRCs have to cover all these aspects, prioritize. What will it do is it'll prioritize the degree of risk and weightage to be given to effectively allocate what is important, what must be seen today and attended to. There could be many compliances which may not have a consequence so drastic as something which is on the top of the priority, like normal, high risk, medium risk, low risk. Put in a GRC in place, put in your systems in place, have the controls, keep testing them effectively, as you said, test them internally, test them externally by way of internal audits, by way of checks and balances in your own system. That's the way forward, and that's what it is. It has to be.
Great. Vidur, since yourselves and the firm are in that position where you advise and interact with regulators a lot, and they pretty much pick up on your brains, in terms of the way forward. I mean, is there some levels of empathy for a CFO? I mean, how? I mean, you are the great golden bridge between the CFO community and the regulator. So, what do you end up, in terms of your two-way communication?
Right. So, you see, as I mentioned, that we cannot afford to slip, and the regulatory bodies, whether it's the MCA, whether it's the SEBI, whether it's the RBI, I think today these are the names. And today, from an auditor's point of view, there is NAFRA. So, NOCLAR, as you mentioned, is something that is equally important as an ethical practices for both the auditor as well as the auditee. Looking at the regulator, interestingly, when we have a CFO's role, see, a CFO today, we all know that he's the officer, he is a KMP under SEBI. He's the one, as you rightly said, is the one who's also equally responsible for what the finances are. Interestingly, what has happened after IFLS, PNB, Divan Housing, and as very recently, the SREI Infra in Finance. Yeah. So what happened? I mean, what did the regulator do? Regulator, Reserve Bank of India, has banned the auditor for a period of time. Now, there is one regulator who's done that. There could be others to follow. Question very interestingly in this forum only, ET CFO, I think I remember reading this some 10 days ago. There was an interview of our former president of the institute. And the question that was asked was, SREI Finance, what is the next thing in terms of what should be the accountability? He mentioned interestingly that it's not just pure the auditors. I mean, there has to be a very soon a question that is going to be asked possibly in terms of the management, in terms of CFO, in terms of the company secretary. So when we talk about regulators, I think regulators are now looking at with a magnifying glass, with a microscope, and the way things are churning out, it's going to be a different ballgame together going forward in the next very soon, very soon.
Okay, yeah, it also reminds me of a fact that just moving ahead or moving from the brief in January 2018, since you mentioned about a CA firm getting banned, I remember SEBI had banned another CA firm in January 2018, and SEBI also ordered disgorgement of wrongful gains of 13 crores, the estimated fee of that particular engagement. Of course, matters are sub judice before the Supreme Court, but I think we are exceeding our brief on that count. Vidur, as we move forward in terms of our discussions, at the end of the day, it's, I mean, where the money is, the mouth lies, or the buck stops, CFOs are under pressure to maximize revenues and costs and are then expected to explore means of cost reductions. And as I said, having myself gone through the grind and looking at sometimes how demotivating the whole compliance function can be, are there, I mean, how do you take the entire thing as a whole, I mean, both the expectations of compliances, the exploring means of reducing costs, and how how do they influence the growth strategy? I mean, I'll be happy if you could address it in a little elaborate manner.
So Aseem, I think we've been bashing compliance a bit too much in terms of what it is. Let me take the positive side to this now. Yes. In terms of and the role of a CFO, because that's the forum that we are addressing today. So I always respect that fact that, as you rightly said, the Harvard Business Analysis has said that the CFO has now moved into a different strategy. You showed us that little circle of life or of a CFO where the roles have now over the period of time moved on. Just as I said, not only a pure financial person who will be there on the board, but also navigating. Now let's look at how compliances or this burden can be a tool for a growth strategy. Let me give you an example. We're looking at India or a global overseas, or let's look at a company which wants to expand from a Gurgaon state or any state to another state, or even if I talk about a state, another jurisdiction, another country. Let's look at an Indian company wanting to set up a business, say in France or in Australia. Now, when it comes down on the CFO's table, what is he expected to do? Is business in terms of what the market is one issue. He would normally do that is look at the compliances. What are the compliances that are required to set up a business or a company in, say, Australia? Those challenges could be different what you set up in France, because there would be a different reporting system. There could be a different accounting system. There could be different tax regime. The complex accounting challenges would be different. So these are different challenges which are triggered off from a compliance point of view. So if a CFO does his entire homework in terms of, if you're getting into a new jurisdiction, what are the compliances required? If all those are documented and taken note of, look how easy the life will be once you go set up the business in that particular jurisdiction. You don't want to land up in France. Today, the world is in a digital economy. Now, we all know that in a digital economy, the world is taxing various items. France had the digital taxes come in place. So these are nuances which, if compliances are not known, how can you participate in a growth strategy for a business? So growth strategy has to be linked with the CFO's role, looking at all these things which are hidden costs, which ultimately will also do a cost saving in their own way, because once you know of the compliances to be followed, you'll follow that by the T, and end of the day, what you'll do is save on the costs by non-compliance of those laws, and you have everything on the table. So I would take that role as a very positive role. Do your homework well, and you are definitely going to be contributing for that growth which your CEO or your CEO is looking at. That's my take on the role.
Yeah, Vidur, with tapering of businesses, which was inevitable as post-COVID, majority of, let's say, businesses, or overgeneralization, some have had the best times of their life also, so to speak, in fairness, is there a pressure on the CFO community now? I mean, with the constraints of budgets, cash flow, I mean, effectively, we had situations where the world was to a grinding halt for a little while, so to speak.
Yeah, so I think that is a past. I recently, which is now a while ago, there was a McKinsey's report in terms of how what you need to prepare for yourself in COVID. So there was a pressure in terms of, I think all of us have gone through that, and we've all launched our cash war rooms, as you may call it. Everybody was talking about liquidity. Save your liquidity in those 12 months. Look at the businesses, how they bounced back. I think there was a pressure at that time. Everybody did save the cost. Everybody did cut down the expenditure. There was these plans, and all people played an important role in developing. And in terms of saving, having the liquidity in place, end of the day, using technology to your benefit. That's how they were able to do. And today, I would say, reaping benefits. And we've seen a sea of change. It's going to be a hybrid model in terms of work from home and from office. And that's the way to be, and take it forward. So whether COVID or no COVID, I think we have a new business, a new normal in terms of how we are going to be looking at things.
Good. I think this was very insightful. Okay, let me sort of put the usual thing. What are the two things which you want every CFO to do, and two things which a CFO not should be looking at?
Okay, I will sort of two golden rules which I would look at to should be doing would be to have a very robust GRC framework. We normally have a workflow which you see, I am a tax expert, but because we manage things, and I also interact at corporates, and my risk team gives me two things to say that, okay, you must have a RACI matrix. If there are CFOs in this forum, they will understand. A RACI matrix and a workflow would mean that there has to be a responsible, accountable, consult, and inform. You must have this workflow. So that's number one for any CFO to have.
So responsible, accountable,
consult, and inform.
Okay.
So that's a RACI matrix. Anybody who's into compliance will immediately resonate with what this is. But this is what is required in terms of a CFO's bigger picture. In terms of the second mantra, as I've also personally believed, is to be connected with your team. And that is not really the finance team. it means the entire team. When you're as a CFO, it means that you have to be connected and make them sensitive about what the compliances are and how it can hit the business in a positive or a negative manner. So these are the two things that I would say from my end to a CFO must have in the bigger framework. There are many in terms of technology, etc., but I think these would be the two ones which are what you should not or they should not be doing is to ignore the power of technology. That's a not, but in a positive manner. So today, technology would mean that if you have an ERP system or a SAP system, it must itself have a trigger of due dates, compliances come to a person. If you don't have that, have a dashboard. Have a dashboard from an expert which was developed, and that will give you those due dates, triggers of anything that is going beyond the critical date. So that's something that if you don't have, you're no longer there. And the not to do is to take anything in terms of a statutory compliance as a secondary compliance. So whether if it's a deposit of a PF on time or if it's a deposit of a taxes on time, any regulatory which should be number one in your priority list. I think these are do's and don'ts that I think from a bigger and a macro level should be in place.
No, I couldn't have agreed more, at least on the second part of your the don'ts, so to speak. I mean, I'm currently instructed by a very well-known CFO of, unfortunately, a beleaguered real estate company to contest his matters before the High Court and to canvass the fact that although he was a CFO, but his role was a little limited, and we are looking at penalties exceeding huge amounts, which have been foisted. I'm sure that would not have been his lifetime earnings also. But then the regulators are so unsympathetic, looking at the larger picture, so to speak, and there's so much public opinion which is getting generated, and these are complicated things. And I personally feel that when such things take center stage of a newspaper or a discussion, these are very complicated things that and then the public opinion comes out. I mean, take for instance this accounting firm where they were told by SEBI to sort of pay back 13 crores of rupees. I mean, it's not that the money would have been in their pockets, so to speak. So when complicated matters take the center stage and I mean pretty much throng the headlines of newspapers, those are not very easy times for people who are helping the business on various sides.
So unfortunately, Sasim, one thing that comes to my mind is the regulator is playing the role, but is it overreaching? And I think as what we have seen in others, what we call the media trial. Unfortunately, whether it's the Bollywood that we've been hearing in the last 20 days or it's anywhere, unfortunately, any news which may be right or wrong is splashed all over, whether it's a WhatsApp or on media. And I think that is which is also playing in havoc in terms of maybe regulator possibly overreaching and saying, okay, this is the right way to teach the way to go forward. But is that the right way? I'm not sure, because then that scares both a professional as well as a CFO sitting on the helm of the affairs to take certain decisions which could be business related, but not necessarily in a malice or in a malified manner to fraud or defraud the entire system. So I think somewhere down the line, that's my personal take again, just to push that conversation in terms of what is being reached and overreached.
Okay, just one last question. Since you pretty much lead the business development practice of your firm and therefore you interact with CFOs and the leaders, I mean, what's the real, outlook or scare in terms of post-COVID at a larger, if you look at the larger picture emanating from, being on the right side of law,
So post-COVID, I think from the CFO's point of view, or from an organization point of view, and a bigger organization point of view, is I've been getting mixed responses from the team. I had an interaction today with somebody, and interesting, there was the whole reaction was one set of people said that in a lockdown, we've been well connected with people. Which is that fine, you've been able to be able to react, talk, get in touch. The other reaction from the same person was, no, the quality of the work. See, for example, he said, I'd hired people 2 years ago, and those 2 years ago, the people have not interacted anybody in physical mode. And look at the person who spent 2 years in a new organization and he would like to interact. So this is the kind of a feedback that I've got is the productivity of those 2 new joinees or 5 joinees is not the same as somebody who's been there in the system for a while. So it's a mixed bag of reactions. People are wanting to go back and have that physical contact in terms of that energy level. So that is missing in terms of when you look at the organization, wherever I've interacted. This is something that has come out in a bigger picture rather than these issues.
Good. No, I think it was very insightful and riveting also. Thank you for gracing this forum today. I really understand the value of your calendar, Vidur, and of your firm. With this, I'll pretty much ask Nidhi, Rohit, and etcfo.com team to take it over from here. So over to our ringmaster, Nidhi.
Thank you so much, Mr. Aseem Chawla and Mr. Vidur Puri, for all your insightful discussions and session. Ladies and gentlemen, to go beyond the typical CFO role, etcfo.com breaks down digital transformation in compliance for a robust, agile, and resilient future. As a part of this initiative, Future of Compliance, brought to you by Clear from the makers of ClearTax, we'll explore various aspects of compliance with the top CFOs and industry leaders of India Inc. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you.